The lack of personal protective equipment has been a national scandal throughout this crisis. Nurses, doctors and care home workers across the country have complained of shortages. But there was supposed to be a plan to ensure everyone had the PPE they needed. This was at the heart of it, a vast strategic stockpile kept in case of a flu pandemic. 50,000 pallets of protective equipment that should have been ready to deploy instantly. But we've been in touch with several workers connected to this warehouse who've spoken of the chaos and ineffective management at Movianto, the company which ran it. It's left many wondering if that may have delayed these supplies getting to frontline health workers. Former policeman Asif Hussain worked at the warehouse in March, just as the UK deaths were rising most quickly. He's one of 4 drivers who all say the operation at the warehouse was chaotic.
Nobody seemed to know what they were doing. It took hours and hours to get one van loaded up. And sometimes they couldn't find the stuff in the warehouse. There was that many pallets of masks and gels and aprons and gloves. Sometimes they couldn't find it.
Ian Rawson was another driver contracted to the new warehouse in late March.
It was chaos, to be honest. They were saying to us that there wasn't enough warehouse staff on nights. But if for that reason, if it that would me, I'd have employed more people.
They're backed up by other interviews, emails and conversations which paint a damning portrait of arguably the most critical warehouse in the UK. Eventually in March, the army was called in to speed up the distribution of this stockpile. But we've uncovered evidence that the alleged mismanagement of the stockpile dated back months, even when it was housed in a different temporary warehouse on Merseyside. This video shows what it was like inside. Some aisles are blocked by surplus pallets, meaning forklift trucks would struggle to get between the racking to deploy all this at short notice.
They had stock on the floor, they had no security, everything was just left in the aisles, we couldn't get back into finish, mastic jointing. It became a nightmare as far as construction goes. But they moved in a building incomplete as far as I was concerned.
I mean, given that this was the UK's strategic stockpile of PPE for a pandemic, how would you describe the level of organisation that they had in that warehouse?
Disgraceful, if I'm being honest.
Movianto claims this was part of the normal inventory checking process. Some stock would be in the aisles as it is temporarily moved down from the racking to allow visual inspection by the stock inventory team. But sources we've spoken to say the aisles were blocked for months. We've also seen detailed reports by 2 asbestos removal companies showing hazardous levels of asbestos dust at multiple locations in the old warehouse in early 2019, which were deemed high risk. This was several months after the PPE stockpile had arrived. Contractors confirmed they were still trying to decontaminate the site when Movianto took possession of the building.
Supplies were even coming into it when we were still working on site. You know, this was a big site. You know, there was demolition work that still needed to be done. The site, as I said, was heavily contaminated when we got there. You know, there was a lot of asbestos we had to deal with.
Movianto says it commissioned its own report in March 2019, which took air samples in the warehouse which were below the level of quantification. And it claims the asbestos issue was only raised by the landlord during a dispute to get Movianto to vacate the building. But there were other problems with this warehouse. It was not connected to mains electricity, instead powered by a number of generators. One of which failed dramatically on Christmas Eve in 2018. Black smoke billowed out for 3 days, with the fire brigade being called out. Movianto admits there was a fire, but says there was no smoke ingress into the building and blames the landlord for failing to provide mains electricity as they were obliged to do under the terms of the lease.
You've got electric malfunction around diesel. You know, it could cause a fire quite easily, actually.
The Department of Health and Social Care told us it's entirely false to suggest the pandemic influenza stock has not been safely or securely stored at all times. Last summer, the stockpile was moved to this new bespoke building, but even once it was here, it's claimed the problems continued. I've spoken to 3 former managers at Movianto who all tell the same story, one of disorganisation and a lack of preparedness. One told me it was the worst company they'd ever worked for. Another said there was chaos at the warehouse after senior staff were forced out during a management cull. The question is, did all that lead to crucial delays when it came to getting PPE out to hospitals like this? In a statement, Movianto insisted that once it was requested to mobilise, it did so without delay, in accordance and in satisfaction of their contractual obligations, adding that military were deployed to Movianto not because of any shortcomings in Movianto's performance, but in support of the national effort to tackle this pandemic. The Department of Health said in a statement, the pandemic influenza stockpile has always been readily deployable, and it is entirely false to claim otherwise.
We develop and implement streamlined logistics and distribution solutions.
But tonight there are questions about whether Movianto really did perform as was expected. At the moment, the country needed it most.